Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee. My name is Councillor Curtis Crossthorne and I am the chair of today's meeting, and the committee for that matter. The meeting is open to the public, and but there are no items containing any exempt information today. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the council's website, and it is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting at a later date. Please can I request that all mobile phones and other such equipment be switched to silent so it doesn't disturb the meeting. I've already heard Steve's ringtone once today and it cracked me up laughing. There is no fire test planned for today, so if there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from the Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is Tudor Square. We will now work around the room for members to introduce themselves, and as always, I will start on my left.
Yeah, good afternoon. Councillor Alan Hooper, West Ecclesfield Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Steve Aries, Graves Park Ward, and I'm substituting for Simon Clement Jones.
Good afternoon, I'm Mike Chaplin. I'm a councillor for Southey Ward and I'm substituting for Councillor Tony Downing.
Councillor Nabila Maulana for Park and Arbourne Ward. Councillor Karen McGowan, Burley Ward.
Councillor Laura Moynihan, Manor Castle Ward and Deputy Chair.
Good afternoon, Marion Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Good afternoon, it's Councillor Brian Holmeshaw, Brumhill and Sherrvale Ward.
Perfect, thank you everybody. As you will have heard then, we have received apologies from Simon Clement Jones and Tony Downing. And so I believe that should be everybody. No further apologies. So item 2, exclusions of public and press. As I said in the opening remarks, the meeting is open to the public and there are no items on the agenda containing any exempt information. So we'll move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on today's agenda? No? Perfect, thank you everybody. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. These can be found from page 11 of the agenda pack. And this item is to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee held on the 2nd of February 2026. Marianne?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to raise something about 38.2, page 12. So we had a discussion after I mentioned that the full council resolution that we were looking at was that the CPL committee would do everything we can to ensure the designs of new leisure centres take full advantage of the capacity for solar panels, and we were promised to have a briefing to ensure that would happen for Springs Leisure Centre. But on that very day, the planning application actually went live on the planning portal. So I think there's something's happened there where that's already gone in and perhaps we won't have the opportunity to input into it. So I just want that to be reflected, that we haven't had that briefing, and maybe we'll be able to have one for future. But at the moment, that's, yeah, there is a bit of an incorrectness there.
Do you have, yeah, Lisa?
Thank you, Chair, Councillor Elliott. I'm Lisa Firth, I'm a Director at Parks, Leisure and Libraries. Yeah, I think the briefing is still planned, Councillor Elliott. The planning application did get submitted, but in terms of the solar panels and what that, the number of solar panels, what they look like, how all the energy and heating is implemented in that new leisure centre is not actually designed as yet. So that briefing is still forthcoming.
Great, that's good to hear, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Is everything else in the minutes, are we all happy to approve the minutes as a true and accurate record with that in mind? Yep, perfect, thank you. And then we'll move on to item 5, public questions and petitions, and we have received none for today's meeting. So we'll move on to item 6, members' questions, and again, you have all been very kind to me, and we haven't received any for today's meeting. So we will move straight on to the work programme from page 19 of the agenda pack, and I believe Joanne is going to talk us through it.
Thank you, Chair. It's the last meeting of the municipal year, so not very much to report today. We'll be doing some work planning in the next few weeks. The only changes to the work programme has been the leisure-built facilities strategy has been delayed until the first meeting of the next municipal year, and the playing pitch strategy has been added to the work programme. We'll be seeing that in the second meeting of the next municipal year. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So I've seen one indication. Karen?
Yeah, I haven't seen it on here, but the community assets, the buildings assets, you know, for community centres, there was a pilot running, I think it was in the north or somewhere, and I haven't seen the report about the outcomes of that or what it means. So I just wondered if that could be put on the work programme for the future to make sure we get that report back.
I think that went to strategy and resources. Is it the community asset transfer policy?
Yeah, but they were doing a pilot of, right, so if it did, I didn't realise that, but it was the outcomes of that. I think it should have come here because it's community buildings and community assets, and I think we could at least have a briefing, because they were looking at different ways that some community groups might want to take over buildings and the different models. There could be cooperatives and all kinds of different models, and I'd like to have seen the detail of that and what they came up with, because every community building is different, isn't it, and has different people using it. So it would have been nice to see something around that.
And even if the asset transfer policy itself went to SNR, it would be good to see how it interacts with the community strategy and how we can help build the community infrastructure alongside it. So I think that's something to add to the for the next committee to look at and see whether they can build policies around that. Laura?
I'm useless with this. Just to comment on Karen's point, I'm often finding there's a mismatch between what goes to strategy resources and finance and what comes here. I know we are informed of capital projects going to finance, but I just think we need to, for the next municipal year, I just think we need to have a look at how things are looped in, because sometimes like that we seem to be missing, and perhaps we fall in between two committees, I don't know, but it's just something. My question was, we're going to be doing a lot of important strategies that are on the work plan. I want to ensure that we do really have good community engagement and feedback, because it talks about stakeholder, for example, in the tree and woodland policy refresh, but every resident in the city is a stakeholder, and I'd want to make sure we don't go to the usual groups, for example, on some of them, friends groups or different things, because a lot of the existing groups with whom we consult tend to be white and often middle class, and I think we need to make sure we get to all sections of the community, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also it builds up their social capital in working with us, and in certain areas it's about diversifying our base. So I just want to have that at the heart of everything that we do, along the lines we did for the community strategy, the type of approach that we did, and using the voluntary community sector to get to those people as well. I also think we need good communications plans as well for each of the strategies to make sure we disseminate the information. So just a thought for next year, Curtis, for you or whoever.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Lisa can take those points on board about the public engagement. And we know that taking your example of the tree and woodlands policy, We know that tree cover is not equal across the city, and underrepresented groups do not have fair tree equity, do they? So it's a very good point. A good example, I also saw an indication from Alan.
Yeah, it's referring back to the community buildings, Chair. Some 18 months ago, the South Lac undertook this project, and as I say, I think it's just got lost in the system. So I think we really need to know where it is and who's dealing with it, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just pointing out on page 24, we've got item 5, which is the strengthening relationships with friends of and other community groups. So I'm just making sure that this doesn't then fall off the agenda. So I'm going to ask, is there an indication of the date for the report yet? You know, is it going to be before the autumn? Is it going to be in the autumn, or is it going to be in spring next year? You know, I think we can do with pinning down a bit more on that one.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to use Chair's prerogative to raise that issue as well. I think, and I'm sure Lisa will correct me if I'm wrong, but we were waiting for the work to be done on the green and blue open spaces strategy before we came together as members to have a bit of a sort of, I suppose, a workshop on what we actually wanted to get out of it. This is from full council, so I think it was going to be more of a members-led policy rather than an officers-led policy, if that's fair to say. So, yes, I was going to ask to make sure that that doesn't fall off the work programme, that it's kept on in the next municipal year, and that the committee take that up to discuss amongst themselves going forward. So that, yeah.
And just to add, also taking into consideration the work done by the policy committee around engagement, and which I think members are involved in and leading, and also green spaces for community, the work that we're doing on our charity sites as well, and how we actually govern the governance around charity sites as well. So those 3 elements are going to feed into that, and it is going to be led by members.
Yeah, and I'll be honest as well, personally I wanted, while the Parks Friends group is where this kind of came from, I think it would also be good to look at how our libraries operate with their friends groups and other friends groups across the city. There'll be a lot for us to learn from friends groups, and we can, that's the benefit of it all sitting under this committee, isn't it? We can take those learning points from all different aspects across the city. But we'll discuss that after the election. So where are we? So we do have recommendations in front of us. That is that the committee's work programme as set out in Appendix 1 be agreed, including the additions and amendments identified in paragraph 4 of the report. We don't have any referrals, do we? So we can ignore that point. Are we all happy to agree the recommendations to accept the work programme? Perfect. That was all agreed. Thank you very much. So we will move straight on to item 8, which is the Q3 budget monitoring report. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and I'll briefly introduce Q3 budget monitoring for 25-26 with a focus on Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee. So members will be aware that this has already been considered by the Finance and Performance Committee, so I'll keep the wider context high and focus on the committee budget's performance, risks and key issues to note. So at a council-wide level, the Q3 position shows a continued improvement on our in-year finances. The forecast overspends reduced from 23.6 million at Q2 to 18.9 million at Q3. The forecast overspend is therefore 4.7 million improvement over the quarter. The improvement reflects sustained progress in SEND transport, some stabilisation in children's services and the impact of stronger corporate spending controls. However, it's important to be clear that the significant pressures remain, particularly in adult social care and other demand and market-driven services. So while the direction of travel is improving, the overall position still requires tight financial discipline throughout the rest of the year. At Q3, the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee is forecasting a net underspend of around 1.5 million against a net revenue budget of 34 million, which is a 0.4 million improvement in the quarter. So overall, it's a positive and stable position. So the key drivers of the underspend, and you'll see this on the chart on page 51, it's largely related to staffing savings and some additional income. So in community prevention, there's a £500,000 saving, reflecting service changes and activity that's now been incorporated into savings plans for 26-27. In business improvement, there's a 0.4 million underspend due to long-standing vacancies. Community safety showing 0.3 million underspend linked to antisocial behaviour officer posts. Youth services 0.3 million underspend due to vacancy management. And Parks and Countryside delivering 0.5 million due to vacancy savings and some additional income. Favourable movements are partially offset by bereavement services, which is forecasting a 0.3 million underspend due to reduced income associated with direct cremations. Overall, these movements net off to a healthy committee position at Q3. In terms of savings, the committee is in a strong position with all savings plans currently green and 100% forecast to be delivered in year. So while the headline position is positive, it's important to note that a significant proportion of the underspend is vacancy driven. Prolonged vacancies can create service delivery and resilience risks, and some of the favourable position is non-recurring, particularly where service changes are already assumed in future savings plans. So these risks are being actively managed through ongoing staffing forecast reviews and discretionary spend. So looking ahead, the Council's now got the benefit of a multi-year funding settlement which provides greater certainty and supports more confident planning. It does give some comfort in the short to medium term, but it doesn't remove the need to ensure that services are sustainably resourced rather than relying on vacancies or short-term underspends. For Communities, Parks and Leisure, this means moving from vacancy-driven underspends to more stable workforce models, ensuring income assumptions are realistic and resilient, and aligning service redesign and savings with the wider Future Sheffield transformation programme. Future Sheffield remains critical to shifting from short-term mitigations towards long-term sustainability through modernisation, productivity improvements and better use of data and digital tools. So in summary, Chair, the Q3 position for the committee is positive with an underspend of around 1.5 million. Savings delivery is strong with all plans on track for delivery in year, and the medium-term focus is on embedding sustainable service and workforce models alongside continued transformation. So I'm happy to take any questions on the Q3 position alongside service colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It feels good to see one of these reports that says that it has an improvement. So that, I know that's been a lot of hard work for the entire team across the council. So it's really good to see. And again, the Communities, Parks and Leisure team have done well to hold the budget where it is and meet all the savings targets as well. I suppose my comment is that the underspend that we have seems to be driven by the corporate level staffing restrictions. And so if that changes in the future, we will, as a service, have to keep an eye on spend to make sure that we don't sort of have a false sense of security over with that. I have seen one indication. Does anybody else wish to comment on this before? No, Laura?
It's in relationship, Chair, to the staffing, the staff vacancy freeze. And it says in there the impact on other staff. I just want to know what we're doing to monitor that. Does occupational health have any evidence of additional stress, or are we doing anything to remedy that? Because it's okay doing it, but you can't do it indefinitely, and it's the impact on staff that are there. The work hasn't gone down, so people are dealing with more, and I just wondered what, if we've got any figures about ill health, whether they've gone up and what actions we're taking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Councillor Moynihan. So there's a couple of answers to that. So if I take libraries as a first example, you may remember that Hillary and the team took the decision to close some libraries at lunchtime because the pressures on staff moving around the city and trying to keep the libraries open whilst carrying the vacancies was proving really difficult. So in order to ensure that staff working in libraries could have their break as planned and to keep the libraries open and operating during most of the day, the decision was taken to close some of the libraries at lunchtime, and we continue with that decision. In areas where, so just taking a step back, there are recruitment restrictions but not recruitment freeze. And the reason that I'm stressing that point is because where there are certain criteria such as health and safety issues, which this would absolutely fall into, or income generating or external grant funding, then we absolutely can still continue to recruit to those vacancies. So if it got to us, so we're monitoring this at a directorate level as well. So in Ajman's area, in neighbourhoods, for instance, as directors, we are taking evidence on a weekly basis and discussing what any impacts of the restrictions might be. Where work is continuing and is not stopping, then if there is an impact on members of staff, then either we will put a case forward to recruit to a post where it would take the pressure off existing members of staff, or we would consider stopping doing some work. At present, that has not needed to happen other than the example that I've given you in libraries. So we are monitoring it closely. There isn't any direct evidence that we have currently of a correlation between increased sickness and the recruitment restrictions, but where that did happen, then we would take action. So I could give you a little bit of reassurance on that.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes, forgive me, I'm only subbing, so they might have already. What has been the impact of the strategic role review on that particular issue that you just talked about?
There is no direct impact on between the strategic role review programme and the vacancy restrictions. What we have found is where services are currently doing the evaluation of the roles within their services that are linked to the strategic role review programme, that has placed an increased amount of pressure on the services, and we have had to, for instance, close some libraries. I keep saying closing some libraries for maybe an hour to allow the staff to have their role review programmes. But there's no direct correlation between recruitment restrictions and the role review programme. That role review programme has got a schedule, it has got a deadline, and it needs to continue. So again, as I said to Councillor Moynihan's point, if in any service, I believe, and I'm speaking pretty much for my services, but I think this applies in other areas as well, the impact of recruitment restrictions meant that services were under so much pressure that it was impacting their ability to go through the role review programme, then some action would be taken. Now I've answered you, I'm wondering whether I've answered the right question, or whether you meant vacancies not being involved in the role review programme. Is that what you meant, Councillor Ayres, or have I?
Well, I meant on the staffing and the vacancy and recruitment, basically, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So if there's no further comments or questions, we will move to recommendations for approval on page 32. Are we all happy to approve those recommendations? Yep, those were agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Jane. We will move on to item 9, which is the faith appropriate burial provision review. This can be found from page 53 of the agenda pack, and we will soon be joined by Ellie and Rob. Welcome again to the committee. Feel free to introduce yourselves when you're ready and then introduce the report.
Hello, I'm Ellie Fraser. I'm Head of Bereavement and Coroner Service.
I'm Rob Swarbrick. I'm Project Officer in Bereavement and Coronial Services.
So we're here at committee today. I hope committee will remember that in September 2025, turning my head and I'm losing the sound. In September 2025, you signed off our cremation and cemetery services strategy. And I'm really pleased that we now have Rob working with us to deliver some of the priorities that come out of that strategy. One of those priorities is a review of our burial services offer, and a dedicated piece of work within that is to review our work and our service offer to the Muslim community. So Rob's been leading the work, so I'm going to hand over to him to take you through the paper and the decisions that we're here to ask of committee today.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Ellie alluded to, I will be delivering a short presentation today to accompany our report, which sets out our approach to undertaking a comprehensive review of our bereavement and burial service offer for the Muslim community. In this presentation, I'll be just giving a brief overview on why this work is required and how it has arisen, the rationale for the approach we've set out in the report, the scope of the review and who will be consulted with as part of the process, a brief update on the work undertaken to date, and finally to outline the recommendations that we are seeking approval for. Before getting into the detail of all that, I do think it's important just to kind of state the core objective of this piece of work, which is to undertake a comprehensive and detailed review of our service offer for the city's Muslim community, with the primary aim of ensuring that we continue to meet community needs, faith requirements and cultural preferences. This work is very much community focused, and we'll be engaging with imams, mosques, funeral directors, faith representatives and other key stakeholders to capture feedback on the current service offer and to produce an evidence-based set of recommendations to bring back to committee for approval. As Ellie alluded to, whilst this report specifically focuses on the Muslim burial offer, this is one work stream within a wider review of burial and cremation provision across the city, which will encompass a number of things from cemetery infrastructure, the range of burial provision currently offered, and how we deliver our services to ensure they're accessible for all our communities. This review sits within the wider implementation plan of the cremation and cemetery services strategy, the contents of which were of course approved by this committee back in September. So just a bit of information into why this work is required. So we do currently offer a tailored provision for the Muslim community to meet faith requirements, including the core requirement of enabling burial to take place as soon as possible after death. And this includes an out-of-hours on-call provision, which allows burial to take place 365 days per year. When we have dedicated sections for this in City Road and Shire Green cemeteries. However, as outlined in our cremation and cemetery services strategy, bereavement services, like many others, has operated within a challenging environment in recent years, which has included financial pressures, the rising cost of living, inflation, which has impacted residents. Whilst this, of course, affects residents of all backgrounds, voices from the Muslim community have highlighted concerns that more could be done to meet their specific faith requirements. And this has been highlighted not only through our correspondence, but through more formal routes, such as questions at full council and to this committee as well. Another important factor is that the Muslim community within our city is growing. In the last census in 2021, about 10.3% of the population of Sheffield was identified as being of the Muslim faith, which was up from 7.7% in 2011. And we are seeing more second, third and fourth generation families who choose to be buried locally as opposed to overseas, which of course increases demand. And finally, in terms of the background for this piece of work, carrying out this piece of work was a recommendation of the 2024 Bereavement Services Task and Finish Group, which was convened to shape the contents of the aforementioned strategy and comprised of cross-party elected members, some of which are in the room today. I think these factors have highlighted that we have a need, but also an opportunity to review our approach and continue to ensure that our service model reflects religious requirements, cultural expectations, and of course remains sustainable into the future. As outlined in our report, there are certain aspects of the service that will be under review, and the sort of scope of the work is set out. And in summary, this will include looking at our pricing and our fees and charges, and looking at how they compare with other local authorities. We'll be looking at our timely and same-day burial offer and out-of-hours provision, and what more can be done to support this. We'll be looking at cemetery opening hours, which is fundamental to allowing burial on time on the same day. And we'll be looking at the paperwork turnaround, which directly affects how quickly a burial can take place. And finally, we'll be looking at how we work with the community going forward to ensure that true partnership model, and to ensure that all stakeholders across the bereavement pathway are working as efficiently as possible to deliver for the community. There's a fair bit of detail on the approach for this piece of work in the report, and I really hope this has come across, but we've designed this approach to be very much people-focused, with people being at the heart of this work. And we've developed an approach that brings together stakeholder engagement, wider community consultation, and also benchmarking against other local authorities. There's a bit of an overview of the timescales in the report, but between now and May, the key focus will be on stakeholder engagement. So we are holding workshops with key partners across the community, including imams, with mosques, with funeral directors, with our Sheffield City Council Muslim Partnership Forum, with faith organisations and other partners across the bereavement pathway. And these sessions have begun, and they are designed to be engaging, interactive, and we're capturing feedback on a standard set of questions to inform the recommendations. Between now and May, we are also engaging with our operational team, so that includes our burial staff and also our staff in the coronial side of the service at Medico Legal Centre. This is to ensure that we get their insight to ensure that recommendations are operationally feasible, safe and realistic. So it's incredibly important that is factored in as well. And we're also conducting benchmarking against other local authorities, which include the core cities, our neighbours and areas of a similar demographic profile. Following this phase of the work and moving into the summer, we're undertaking a community consultation via a citywide survey, which will be supported by outreach through the VCF sector. This piece of the work is incredibly important because we want to ensure that quieter or less represented voices are integrated into the work, including women, small community groups, and those who may not participate through traditional consultation routes. This is outlined in the accompanying quality impact assessment, but it's incredibly important to note that the Muslim community itself is very diverse, and we want the recommendations to reflect the diversity of views and the wider expectations of the community. Following all these pieces of work, recommendations will be developed, and then we propose to bring these back to committee before the end of the year for approval. It's worth acknowledging that in the meantime, we are also looking out for any quick wins that come out of the feedback, and to see if we can identify any changes that can be implemented within our gift to do so, and to do so quickly. Work on this review has already commenced, and this has included early engagement with key stakeholders. We've held a couple of the workshops so far, and we're also begun sort of gathering the insights from our staff. This has provided a solid foundation for us to build on and to integrate any feedback from now and to amend our approach if required. And finally, before looking at the recommendations, I do just want to reiterate that our approach has been developed with the Council's values in mind. It's very much about placing an emphasis on our people and on our communities and designing services around what matter to our residents. Through this work, we also have the opportunity to strengthen relationships, to build trust, and to support a joined-up approach to service improvement. With that being said, this work is also focused on developing recommendations that are proportionate, financially and operationally feasible, and also realistic. So finally, before moving on to any comments or questions, I just want to note our recommendations, which are to note the progress made to date on the review, to approve the next phase of work as set out in the report, to endorse the approach for developing the final recommendations, and to request a further report later this year where we will set out our evidence-based recommendations along with a proposed implementation plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that very thorough introduction to the report. I think it's worth saying how much work has gone into this, and the entire review from the task and finish group that we had right up until now is great to see the timeline of it and how things that members and other people raised in the task and finish group are being actioned and plans are being produced. So it's fantastic to sort of see the progress there. And I think from my own perspective as well, it's good to see, you mentioned the cremations and cemetery services strategy that we agreed, was it September? And I think in producing that, the council had one of its biggest ever survey responses. And so it's good to see that while there is a survey aspect to this work going forward, it's more direct engagement with different stakeholders to sort of really hone in on what people want and need. So it's good to see that we're not just doing a survey for the sake of it, we're kind of focusing on what a survey is good at and doing the engagement directly with stakeholders as well. So that was really good to see in the report. But I have seen Nabila raise a hand and Laura. Does anybody else while I'm here? Oh, Alan, perfect.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, almost exactly what you've just said. It's a really, really comprehensive report. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say I very much welcome this sort of, I suppose, workshop-style engagement that you outlined here. And I look forward to, seeing the recommendations that come out of it. But, very similarly, wanted to say thank you because I know it's been a long piece of work that's taken a long time to get here. So I think this is quite good and looking forward to it.
Perfect, thank you. We'll take the questions first and then go back over if that's okay. Laura?
Yes, it's a reward time. Thank you. It's an excellent piece of work. And I really like the community development approach to this because that's what it is about, really, this community development. In the benchmarking, you say you're going to look at operational models, delivery models. Do you have any idea of which local authorities you might be looking at? Because I know, for example, that Blackburn has a model that is about delivering the services jointly with the community and the council. And I do think that's probably a good, I mean, I'm not predicting the outcome, but it does seem to me that that would be a good model to really pursue the co-delivery option. And the other question is, I've spoken to some Muslim friends and they don't know everything that's happening in their communities, but they're not aware of any particular charitable ways of funding. I mean, people have said it's unaffordable and people shouldn't be penalised because of their faith requirements. And I know the concrete liners are nearly £1,500, for example. Are there any such trusts in Sheffield like they are in some other places where the community sets up a trust to help people afford funerals? And if not, is there a way of looking at that as part of the review? Thank you.
Two very good points there. We'll take Alan first and then come back for some answers. Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Rob, you certainly get the challenging projects. Well done, you have a comprehensive report. This came to us last September, and prior to that, there was representations at full council early in the year. Time's moving on. Could I suggest that, if possible, that it comes back to us in September? I know the timescales are short after the consultation, but I think it would be good to try to move things on because there will be quite a few people and organisations out there that will want some feedback and results. So thank you very much.
Perfect. So some good comments and questions there. So back over to the panel.
Thank you all for the questions. Firstly, the comments from Councillor Malana and Councillor Crossthorne. I would just like to say thank you for, I suppose, the kind words about the approach we put together. I just think going back to the consultation in January 2024, where we received 2,920 responses, around 80% of which were from the Muslim community. And I think that's given us a really good sort of benchmark to build on. And you know, the approach we've developed is kind of about having a blend of engaging in-person sessions and also reaching out to the wider community. So that's, yeah, thank you for the comments on the approach. To address Councillor Moynihan's first question about benchmarking, I can confirm that Blackburn and Darwin is one of the local authorities that we're looking at as part of this. There are 17 local authorities in total that we are going to be benchmarking against for this piece of work. They include the core cities, but also areas of a similar demographic profile. Bradford is also an example of a local authority area where the Muslim offer is delivered in partnership, and that's something we're going to be looking at as part of this process as well. Some of the local authorities that we've integrated have been identified by residents. So in one of our stakeholder meetings a couple of weeks ago now, we were given some feedback on where some best practice in Kirklees, for example, and Wakefield, and they will be integrated into this into our benchmarking as well. So that's the rationale for that. In terms of the trusts that exist in Sheffield, I'm not too sure on the answer to that myself. May need Ellie or at least to come in on that one, but I can say that we are aware that some residents do use sort of GoFundMe pages and options like that to afford the burials, which is feedback we had the other day, and I think it's all the more important for looking at our fees and charges and what can be done in that regard.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a little bit. So that trust model that you've described does exist in Sheffield. I think there are a few of them, but what we are hearing from people that we're liaising with is that is a diminishing model. It is phasing out younger generations, and I think it's natural of anybody. You don't feel about you're not talking forward to your death and your bereavement when you're much younger, and so younger people aren't paying into those pots as early on. So we think that is a model that is going to phase out. But as Rob's described, what we need to do is look at the cost of the service, make sure we're not penalising people because of their faith or religion requirements, and make sure that we've got a cost-effective burial offer for people. So.
Thank you. And to address Councillor Hooper's question on the report coming back in September, I think one thing I will say, the rationale for the approach is we want to kind of do it once and do it well, and not necessarily rush through it. I'm leading on this piece of work, but also managing other projects as well, so capacity will have to be managed, but I think it's something we can take away and look at the timescales and discuss whether we can get it for September.
I think if I just add to that as well, I think Rob's right, we need to do it right, and that's more important than doing it fast. But what we will do as we go through is if things come forward that can be easily implemented, we won't wait till we've concluded. We'll feed back to you about changes we're making along the way, if that's possible.
Perfect. And Nabila, did you want to come in quickly on the point?
I mean, I'm just full of comments today, apparently. I suppose just to sort of follow on a little bit about what Councillor Moynihan was saying, I mean, I completely agree, Ellie. You know, we want to be able to afford, to provide affordable options in the first place to avoid people having to use, you know, GoFundMe and all the rest of it. But we also know that, like, the British Muslim community donates something to the tune of, you know, over £2 billion every year to various charities and various causes. And I suppose I'd be interested to, I dare not speak for the Muslim community, but I'd be interested to know that when we're doing all this, you know, community engagement, maybe a question to the mosques is there a pot that community members would be willing to pay into, because they do have, you know, pots available for different services, and maybe this could be one of them. But I don't know if, you know, that could be a question or a conversation point in the consultation you'll be doing.
I think the short answer is yes. We want to hear feedback and we want to explore options. We need to look at how it works alongside a partnership delivery model, but absolutely we can explore it.
Very good point. Have we got any other comments or anything? Do you have anything further to add before we come to the recommendations? No? Perfect. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again for all the work that's gone into this and all the work that is going to go into this. It's going to be a lot, but thank you. So we turn to the recommendations for approval on page 55. Are we all happy to approve those recommendations? All agreed. Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. So we will move on to item 10, which is the collection management framework for the library non-lending material. And we are joined by Hilary and Alex. Feel free to introduce yourselves and then make a start of a report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Hilary Coulson. I'm the head of the Library and Archive Service.
I'm Alex Holyoke. I'm a Policy Improvement Officer for the Libraries.
Thank you. So today we are seeking approval for our proposed approach for the non-lending material within the Sheffield Libraries collection. The report sets out that the service does have a significant amount of non-lending material, much of which is located in the basement stack of the Central Library. For those of you that have been kind of around the library, you may be aware of that. I think it's worthwhile just covering some of the basics, but I'm not going to go through the report in kind of masses of detail. So by non-lending material, really what we mean is items that aren't publicly accessible. So they're not on our open shelves, and we wouldn't generally lend them. So it includes kind of older material that would have been termed kind of reference, probably, in kind of like previous kind of library strategies. It is worth us noting that there has been no written approach on how the service kind of collects, curates, retains this type of material. So what Appendix 2 is setting out is a proposed approach for how we basically kind of take stock of what we have collected over the past kind of 90 years and more, and trying to clarify that the purpose of kind of a modern library services non-lending material is there to try and provide access to unique items that are of cultural and heritage value, and particularly that are locally relevant. We are not trying to stock every kind of particular kind of like item across every kind of like subject matter. So I think there is probably a change of approach in terms of the value of kind of like non-lending material. So we think that the approach will be largely positive, and that some of the benefits are around trying to get a stronger focus and a clearer view about what we are retaining and why, trying to make that more accessible, and giving us a better chance to celebrate some of the rare and unique items that we hold within our collection. That will then lead into the service's priorities for future digitisation and preservation. So page 89 of the report sets out some principles that we are proposing that will guide our overall approach. And that is to retain items that are linked to Sheffield's cultural offer. It will then kind of hopefully feed into some of the kind of events, exhibitions, displays that are kind of put on by the library service. Crucially, that it supports our heritage offer, enabling people to explore their local history and the history of Sheffield's diverse communities. And thirdly, any material that directly relates to Sheffield, and that will form part of the library's local studies collection. So if material doesn't fit with those principles, we've also then set out our approach about how we would then curate that. And this is kind of a layered approach. So firstly, we would look to offer material to other public institutions, trying to kind of prioritise keeping kind of items in kind of like the public access. And after that, we might then consider sale or then disposal as a last point, depending on the items themselves. So we kind of wanted to bring this to life for you a little bit. So in the Appendix 1 on page 95, I'm just going to hand over to Alex, who's going to set out some of the items and some of the thinking behind them.
Hi. I won't go through every example that we've got, but I think just in terms of giving some examples about how we might approach evaluating some of this material, I thought it would be helpful to have some photos, because otherwise I found it quite difficult to sort of like get it in my head, so visually it's quite useful. So on page 95 we have a photo of one of Speed's maps. So this is from 1611. It's the first printed atlas to cover the whole of the British Isle. The photo absolutely doesn't do it justice. It's an absolutely beautiful item that is going to be, should be sort of like on exhibition. It's the sort of thing that someone would love to come and have a look at. It's like a really interesting cultural items. So that would absolutely be something that we would be looking to retain under this framework. If we go to page 96, we have a copy of the Television and Consumer Electronics Journal for May 2005. It is something that is outdated, doesn't relate to Sheffield, doesn't really have cultural value. So that would be something that we would be fairly confident saying that the library does not need to keep anymore. And then from page 97, there's an example of some of the material where we would want to have a proper think about this thing, quite frankly. So the book in the middle, A History of the Uniforms of the British Army, it's an old book. It probably doesn't have the cultural value that, say, Speed's Maps does, but also you'd have to ask yourself, does it have any information relating to something like a local regiment, whereby actually it would be useful for someone researching their family tree? The answer at present is we don't know. It would require a further investigation. So that's kind of like the three categories that we're anticipating most of this material falling into.
Thank you. And I think our engagement with kind of stakeholders and kind of like interested groups has really highlighted to us that how we approach this and how we work through the process actually is just as important as our overall framework and approach. So where there are kind of items that we think are worthy of kind of like further assessment, further engagement, we will look to engage with kind of like the most relevant kind of like stakeholders and groups. So for kind of like academic materials, that may be the universities. If there are kind of like particular kind of communities that may have an interest in them, we will try and make it so that it is relevant to the material as we work through it. It is worth noting that we do hold sometimes quite large numbers of duplicate copies. So this will have kind of like been kind of incurred over time, but there are some items that absolutely do meet our criteria for retaining them, but we've set out that we will keep a maximum of 3 copies. So we know, for example, we came across one item that had 10 copies because there's 2 in the archives, 4 in the local studies library, 4 in the central lending library. So you may see that some items you think, well, actually, you should be retaining that, but that will be because we are looking to reduce the amount of duplicates that we hold. So the financial implications on kind of page 92 are trying to clarify that in approving the framework, we're not having an immediate kind of financial implications. It doesn't lead us into a direct kind of implementation. What it does is it gives us a basis on which to start developing a more detailed implementation plan and kind of cost that, because that is quite a significant piece of work. As such, we are recommending that the committee today approve the collection management framework for non-lending material, and note that we will develop a costed proposal for the framework as part of the next year's budget planning. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that report. I think anyone that's moved house could only dream of producing a report like this, of a full plan of what you're actually going to do with things, because I was surprised actually in your report not to hear the 9-kilometre figure. Is it 9 kilometres of shelving down in the central library basement? So there is a lot to go through, and there'll be a lot of treasures down there that we don't fully know exist, and we're not able to take care of them how we should be because we don't know that they're down there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's things like the magazine that we might not necessarily need. And I think it's worth saying as well that the role of the non-lending library is kind of being eaten up at one end by the internet and at the other end by the British Library, and so the role has changed there as well. So I think that what you've produced is a good way forward. I've seen indications from Karen, and I'm certainly not surprised to see Brian's hand either, and Mike as well. So let's take Karen first.
Yeah, thanks for this report. Just a couple of things. When you've decided what you're going to dispose of, there's different options about contacting local groups or selling. So my first thing is, if you sell it, what's happening to the funding? Is it going back into the service? How long are you going to retain things for? Because you might make a decision to get rid of it and then to sell it, but how long are you going to have it sat there waiting to see if someone comes? You know, is it going to be 3 months, 6 months? We don't want you to have to retain it forever until you get a buyer. And is your vision to have a member of staff doing this full time? Because it's going to be a big job, like you say. How long do you think it'll take to get to the end of it? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take Brian's question next. Then we'll go back for some answers, and then we'll do the other two. Brian?
Oh, it's a checking question, really, on where things are stored at the moment. I mean, I know that's not the focus of this report, but it kind of begs the question to me about whether there are any outlying stores in Sheffield. We know that for other services that is a necessity. Different types of storage are needed for different types of items, artifacts, for example. But are there any outlying stores, or is it all central stack based? Because if there are outlying stores, that's a cost implication for rental, I suppose. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Take some answers.
Thank you. So I'll come to Karen's point first. So in terms of where any kind of monies would go if we sold them, I think the proposal for this is trying to think around, as we move into implementation, a kind of slightly multifaceted approach. So we will hopefully be looking for kind of grant funding to try and kind of like digitise and kind of catalogue some of our kind of quite unique items. But the intention is that the sale would then kind of like go back into that project and kind of circulate round. This isn't about trying to kind of like generate a kind of a new revenue stream, but reflecting that the items have been purchased for the people of Sheffield, and it feels right that we go through a process which may be kind of almost offering it back to them for sale, obviously at a much reduced cost, rather than just kind of looking to kind of like sell kind of commercially or kind of dispose. The question about how long we would retain stuff for sale, I think is a really, really good one. I don't have a short answer. I'll try and give you a shorter answer to quite a long thought. I think it might depend on the type of stock. So I think where we are looking to rehome and donate stock rather than sale, actually we think that it has a relevance of being publicly accessible, and that is likely to trying to find the right home, and a home that is kind of like able to take it might take slightly longer. Where things are available kind of just for public sale, and we have made a clear decision not to retain them, yet we would have to set a time limit. But yeah, we would try and make that as pragmatic as possible. But I think that is probably one for us to answer going on. How long for the timescales? That I don't know. And I think that's probably also the right answer. I think when we talk about the material kind of in the middle, so it doesn't clearly fall into, yes, we should definitely retain this or we definitely shouldn't. Actually having the conversation, engaging with those groups, developing those kind of partnerships, I think is going to be really critical to making some really kind of good, strong decisions. So that kind of level of partnership working, I think, may take time to develop. And also I think there is a level of confidence that I think as you get further into it and you are kind of more engaged with people who are inherently interested in this stock, actually, those decisions hopefully will become quicker. But I don't have a fixed time scale. And then in terms of the vision, I think it is not just one member of staff. I think Councillor Crosthorne was right. There is 9 kilometres, 6 miles of shelving. I think that would be quite a long and lonely job. But I think it's trying to think about the different skills that we would need to go through that. So where there are kind of like clear decisions, actually it's about kind of cataloguing it, making the items kind of accessible, and then there will be kind of other people that need to kind of be more engaged in that decision making. So yeah, I think it is more of a team of people. Some people actually doing outreach, some people doing kind of like grant funding applications and things like that. I think it's a bit multifaceted. Okay. And then coming on to Councillor Holmshaw's question. So in terms of where things are stored, for the non-lending material, it is largely in the basement stack of the library. So there is a basement store in Manor Library, which we will call the out of print store. That is kind of largely fiction, but that is lending material, so we would loan that. So it's not kind of covered by this, it's kind of covered by our other kind of like collection management framework. And other material will be stored at kind of Shoreham Street of the archives. So there isn't a kind of a external kind of rented storage that we have for things in the basement stack. It is kind of largely in there, but there may be some kind of like smaller areas of other less related material.
Thank you for those responses. Mike?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hilary, for this report. It's probably something that should have been done a while ago, like a few other jobs at Sheffield City Council. You've done the report now, and I'm sure it's going to go through, but there's then a resourcing implication for this. It is going to take more than one person to do this. And probably leaving one person to do it, well, apart from the length of time, it could could unreasonably mess with their heads depending on their temperament. I do remember probably around the early 1990s, previous director of libraries, Keith Crawshaw, showing me that he had a selection. I don't think it was that big, but he did have a selection of banned books. And
why do you want them?
I forget. I think it was the one he drew attention to. I seem to remember was a book which was sort of about history. I'm trying to think of the author, and I can't right now. But it does raise a question about whether you have to keep those in storage indefinitely, or whether there's. But it might be something you have to check with some of your material as to whether it can be released. But yes, I'd also like an answer on how, once the report's accepted, how you're going to go. What's the next stage really? How are you going to make this work? Because are you going to take librarians away from our community libraries in order to get this work done, or have you got officers who are qualified and capable to do the work and the money to do it as well?
Thank you. I'd rather not get into a debate about banned books at the last meeting before the election. I'm sure it's behind a hidden door with some weird code to get in. But anyway, I saw indications from Alan and Steve, so we'll take those as well. Alan?
Yeah, uncovered a huge can of worms. The digital aspect would interest me, what you could digitalise. Bearing in mind that a lot of the archives aren't just books, they're maps and all sorts of individual items. Looking at disposal and sale, I think we don't need to rush into that, but we need to bear it in mind. There are organisations out there that do archiving, town and parish councils, and quite a lot of archiving material in 1974 when the West Riding was taken in, and Derbyshire. A lot of information came there from that sort of area, and could they be, if they're going to be sold or disposed of, could they be disposed back to town and parish councils? They do have archiving at Bradfield and Ecclesfield Parish Council. I don't think there's any rush to get rid of stuff. We need to be very careful of what we dispose of. And have you thought of using volunteers? Because some of the people out there are expert at archiving and digitalising material. Certainly at the current time, for the last 3 or 4 years, Ecclesfield Parish Council have been digitalising loads of archives from various people, photographs and material. So they have got the digitalised. I think Stockbridge have also done it, so it's out there. But volunteers may be very useful, especially if they're used to digitalising and archiving material. You mentioned about universities, who I'm sure would be willing to take some of this material on board. But thank you very much. But as I said earlier, when Councillor Chaplin was speaking, we need a young person who's going to do this, because he'll be in the job for a long time. I don't know if you're aware, but there has been some press release within the local, I think Sheffield, Radio Sheffield and Sheffield itself, about, is it 90,000 items and whatever, It's been a bit bitten anyway. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And Steve? Microphone. Microphone.
Then I could ask questions about whether approaches have been made to the universities, which I think Alan's just mentioned. The other question was, I was trying to get a picture in my own mind of the well-known. We all know about the fabric of the Central Library and just how safe and secure the material is there currently, and what sort of plans are there if it is just, if the particular items are to be stored at another location, about ensuring that the right condition, because some of the sort of older tapestries and that may require particular environmental conditions to, so I just wonder what sort of processes you've got in place for those that need to be stored elsewhere.
Excellent, some good and varied questions there. Back over to you.
Thank you. So I will start with Councillor Chaplin's questions. I will touch a little bit on the banned books, although not in masses of detail. I think for us, the point about retention is around the purpose of retention. So are we retaining things that have cultural value, that have kind of heritage value, or that they relate to kind of the local area in Sheffield? And I think it's really important when we go through this, there will be different opinions on probably lots of items. I think we picked the television manual because we thought that was probably one of the safer kind of options, but I am absolutely convinced that there will be interest in that. Just because it doesn't meet our principles for retention doesn't mean it isn't interesting to somebody. Actually, they are interesting, and just the sheer range of material is interesting. But I think coming back to those principles of why are we retaining it, and would you expect to see it in the public library service for a city the size of Sheffield, I think is really important that we think about how we are going to use that, how we're going to kind of like celebrate that, because I think otherwise you can get drawn off into quite tangential conversations about kind of whether it's to somebody's taste, whether it is not, and I think that is not the purpose. The purpose is to offer kind of access to a range of materials for people who may not otherwise get access to them. The implementation point, I think we are quite clear that the scale of the project is beyond the capacity of the staff within our existing service. We are, and I think partly this is reflective of the fact that you mentioned that maybe this is kind of slightly kind of overdue, and I think that it is a significant piece of work. I think the staffing focus of our service has been rightly about public access and lending stock and making sure that our kind of libraries are kind of vibrant and accessible for people kind of across the city. So I think that making sure that our implementation plan sets out a kind of a realistic proposal about what that would take, thinking about grant funding, thinking about kind of volunteers, thinking about expertise that may exist kind of elsewhere. But we wanted to make sure that the approach was right before we started getting into that detail, because I think there is a really detailed kind of implementation plan for us to develop on the back of this. So, the intention is not to kind of, if you like, kind of move staff out of our kind of community kind of hub libraries and kind of focus on this, but there will be a balance of using some of the existing knowledge in the service and then thinking about what else we need to do to support that work. Okay. So if I come to Councillor Hooper's question, sorry, I just realised I'm out of the way of the microphone. I think there is a large digital aspect to this. I think increasingly people find material digitally and actually may not either be able to access the central library depending on kind of various reasons. So actually that kind of discoverability digitally is really important. In terms of the type of material that we're talking about in the non-lending kind of material, it is largely kind of books and journals. So kind of maps and kind of documents are more within our kind of archives rather than the kind of the central library basement. Because of that, they've had an accessioning policy, if you like, for many, many years. As such, we're not proposing to review that material and kind of remove any of it. If it's in the archives, it's kind of there in perpetuity, really. But in terms of digitising what we keep, I think you're absolutely right about kind of volunteers. We have a number of quite dedicated volunteers who do that digitisation for Picture Sheffield. So there are kind of hundreds of thousands of pictures from lots of different eras across Sheffield, and that is all done through the work of kind of volunteers, which is a fantastic resource. But I think, just to come back to your particular point around, obviously we will have ingested things from the West Riding and Derbyshire. I think over recent years, our archives and local studies teams have worked quite hard to kind of repatriate that to the right places. If there are any other and kind of remaining material, we would look to make sure it got to the right home rather than think that it goes for sale. So when we think about the process, it is very much a kind of a layered approach. So it is retention first. If not, how can we rehome it and keep it in public use? If not, then we might look whether it's relevant for sale. So it's kind of in that sort of tiered approach. So hopefully that will kind of reassure on that point. And last but not least, Councillor Ayres, yes, so we have approached our kind of universities. Alex did quite a detailed piece of engagement work. So we didn't want to do a kind of a survey on this. We wanted to actually kind of go and talk to people, and I think they were supportive of our overall approach.
Yeah, I think we were supportive of the principles of the framework, and happy to lend further support and have conversations as we do some of the work where we actually generally identify the material that we've got in the stack in the central library. We will be wanting to go back to some of those colleagues in universities to kind of see if that's appropriate for some of their libraries or not.
And then the final point about the safety material, I think that's absolutely right. So I would kind of assure people that all of the material in the basement stack, it is secure, it is kind of under secure access. For things like the speeds maps, they are in kind of strong rooms kind of within the basement stack, so they are absolutely kind of there and secured. I think when we look at its storage kind of longer term, particularly for things that we are going to kind of retain forever, it is about making sure that that kind of environment is right. So all of the material within the City Archive, which is at Shoreham Street, is all kind of temperature and environmentally kind of like controlled within there. So all of the kind of items around kind of like maps and kind of like really very old kind of material, we will probably look to try and move into that collection to make sure that it's got the right kind of level of environmental conditions. But largely it's a paper-based kind of collection, so we don't have kind of like tapestries and things like that. That would mostly be within the kind of like the museum's collection rather than the libraries and archives. Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you for that. Just want to add at the end as well that one of the things that's always been on the horizon for the council has been the renovations of the central library. Even before I was a councillor, it was always one of those things that could happen, and this is a cornerstone of that work, and this is fundamental for us moving that project forward. So it's really good to see progress on this and to see a clear, actionable plan to move that forward. So if there's no further comments or questions, we'll move on to the recommendations on page 87 of the reports pack. Are we all happy to agree those recommendations? Those have all been agreed. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the report. Time for you to get reading 9 kilometres worth of literature now. So we move on to item 11 of today's agenda. This is a Sport England Place investment acceptance from page 115, and we are joined by Catherine. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Catherine Mudge, Service Manager within the Sport, Leisure and Events team, and I'm here to talk to you today about 2 recommendations. Firstly, to approve Sheffield City Council to become the accountable body for grant funding in relation to Sport England revenue around a project called Sheffield Moves. we would be the accountable body to Sheffield Hallam University, who are the lead applicant in this case. And the second recommendation is to enter into a formal agreement with Sheffield Hallam University Limited for the grant funding of just over £1 million. To give you some background on the project itself and the revenue funding itself, this is national funding through Sport England, so it's called the Place Expansion Investment. Sport England nationally are looking to work in a place-based way, working with currently nearly 70 places up and down the country, aiming to try and reduce inactivity and tackle health inequality that exists in the country. Sheffield was identified as a potential applicant in phase 2 of this scheme. So this involved us working in Sheffield with the NCSEM, which is the National Centre of Sport and Exercise Medicine. Sorry for all the many acronyms that are involved in sports funding. So NCSEM are a collection of partners across the city that work together to try and improve opportunities for people to be more active in the city, and they were the formal applicant to Sport England. Sheffield Hallam University are the lead accountable body on behalf of the NCSEM, and in connection with this funding, Sheffield City Council have been selected to lead 2 important elements of this revenue funding, most notably the community development aspect and the Move Well service. I won't go through every single element of the report because clearly you've seen that in front of you. However, just to highlight a little bit of information about those 2 specific elements. So the community development part of the programme is to work in a local-based way alongside the voluntary and community sector and residents themselves to identify what activities they would like to see and how they would like that to be delivered. So a significant amount of resource and time is needed for community listening and engaging with those residents. There are 5 focus communities that have been selected as part of this investment to work in. They are Firth Park, Woodthorpe, Arbourthorne, Batemore and Jordanthorpe, and Tinsley. This selection of those areas were based on a long list provided by Sport England that relates to inactivity data. We then, as a team within the NCSEM model, went and undertook a 6-stage process to help us identify 5 of those 29 for us to work in, noting that £1 million doesn't stretch to 29 areas, so we've been able to work in 5, and they have very high inactivity levels coupled with significant health inequality in all of those areas. Alongside that, as I say, we will be delivering the Move Well service. This is a service we currently already provide operational oversight for in the city. It's been running just over 12 months now in a pilot process, and this funding will enable us to roll out that service significantly over the next 2-year period as the funding it covers. The Move Well service typically supports people with long-term health conditions. So we focus on supporting people to be more active, noting the challenges and the barriers that they face depending on the various different health conditions that they have. As you'll see from the report, the majority of the funding that we would receive goes towards staffing. This is a revenue budget and requires a significant amount of additional work for the Sport, Leisure and Events team to undertake. So the lion's share of this funding relates to staff. In the community development aspect, there is a significant amount of funding that's allocated to community services. So that's us going into service level agreements with local organisations for them to deliver exactly what the community need as they are best placed, and our role is to support them and build their capacity alongside residents to be able to continue to deliver physical activity in their communities. The only other thing that I think I'll add at this stage is in relation to the implications. So it's a complicated arrangement, really. So Sheffield Hallam University are required to enter into agreement with and accept the terms and conditions of the funding with Sport England. We will then work with Sheffield Hallam University on a back-to-back agreement that in effect will pass on those terms and conditions in relation to the two aspects that I've just talked about. In the main, that is key performance indicators or KPIs, some monitoring information, and a commitment to evaluation and learning and continuous improvement across those two areas. As it states in the report, we haven't had yet that back-to-back agreement. That is being worked on, but it's very likely that those terms and conditions will be exactly the same as what Sport England are asking Sheffield Hallam to sign up to. So in effect, if there is any fundamental changes to that, we will come back to committee to provide an update, but we're expecting those terms and conditions that have been reviewed by our Legal and Finance colleagues, as you can see in the report, will remain exactly the same, and they will just be passported onto us at the council. So I'll pause there for any questions.
Excellent, thank you. I've seen one indication so far, so over to you, Nabila.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine. It's really, really good to read the report. I was especially pleased about the funding allocated to the council then being invested in these priority areas. I just wondered if there was going to be any sort of communication with like ward level councillors. I only say this because my ward's one of those listed. Obviously think it's really important work. You know, we're very much aware of, I suppose, the 10-year life expectancy gap between some parts of the city and the other. And so I'm really, really keen to see this work taking place. I just really appreciate, and I'm sure other councillors would, just, you know, find out a little bit more about the activity that's taking place, find out how we can publicise this to as many communities as possible in our wards. But yeah, I'm very, very happy with the rest of it, so thank you.
Perfect, thank you. We'll take Laura's question as well.
Thanks, Catherine. I know quite a bit about this project, the Move Well, because I've been on the advisory board for it, and it's really good to see that it's reaching groups that traditionally haven't been involved in exercise. It's not a question about this is mainly about the agreement and the funding, but I want to talk about the principles of what's happening. How will the lessons learned be fed into other mainstream activity? And I'm particularly thinking about Everyone Active. And I'm thinking about the new, well, it's not Springs Leisure Centre, but the Uriah Rennie Centre, because that's based in Arbourthorne. So I want to make sure that these just don't exist in isolation, that the lessons we're learning from the pilot and everything else are fed, and when we know what works, that we feed this into mainstream activity. And in relation, my other point has already been asked by Nabila, that ward councillors are kept updated about what's happening. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you for those questions. Back over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, councillors, for your questions. So the first, Nabila, thank you, and absolutely, local members will be crucial to this. Part of the reason that we've not been able to start some of those conversations because we're not formally in agreement yet, and until we can do that, unfortunately, we can't start formally having those conversations. Having said that, we have gone to LAC managers' meetings and engaged with LAC officers around this potential funding coming, so we will be working with partners, including LAC officers and more importantly councillors, to understand who do we need to go and speak to, who are the people that know what it's like to live in the communities, where do people interact, where do we need to go to start having our conversations with residents. And just to note, it's fair to say, and leads me on to part of the answer to Councillor Moynihan's question, this Sport England funding is very much around learning and continuous improvement. So part of signing up to this funding is that we there's a significant amount of evaluation and learning that takes place both on a Sheffield level, on a regional level and at a national level. So there's a evaluation and learning plan that's part of any Sport England investment and is important and key to this. And then, yeah, the lessons learned are taken from a national level across all of the place partnerships, of which there are 70 in total. Albeit what works in one location doesn't always work in another, so some of that needs to be taken into account. But the ingredients, typically, of what works in working with communities will be learnt, as I say, not just in Sheffield, but across the country. The first 6 months, roughly, of this funding is about community listening, so going out and having those conversations with members, with the community, and particularly with the community development element of this fund. It has to be community-led, so the community will lead activity, they'll create their own plan, which is why I can't tell you at all what will happen in any of the areas yet, because it's not for me to say, it's for the community to tell us that, and for us to work and support them to be able to deliver that.
Excellent, thank you for those responses. I think this project will not only help people lead healthier lives, but it, as you say, it's that community aspect to it. So hopefully after the investment period, the benefits will be felt in these communities for years and years to come, because it's about building the infrastructure alongside it. I think that's one of the really good things to read in this report. So if there's no further comments or questions, we will move straight to the recommendations on page 118. Are we all happy to approve those recommendations? Agreed. Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you, Catherine. That was agreed unanimously, and that brings us to the end of the agenda. I think before we all run off there, I just want to take a moment to thank members of the committee, not just the permanent members of the committee, but the substitute members as well. It's probably fair to say that while we don't always agree on everything, we have carried ourselves with respect for each other and with our residents and the city kind of at the core of what we do, and that comes across with the discussions that we have in our meetings. But I would also like to thank officers as well for all the work that they've done throughout the last year and beyond that as well. As we saw today, some real long-standing projects are making progress, and it's really good for us to see as members, to see that work taking place. So there's a lot of hard work going on. And also to Joanne, who I believe is your last Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee meeting.
Unless you decide to have an extraordinary one like the
No.
Charity Trustees.
No. Yeah. So again, yeah, thank you to everybody, and I'm sure I will see some of you on the 8th of May at the English Institute of Sport, and have a fun few weeks.
On behalf of the Labour members of the committee and the substitutes, I'd like to thank you, Curtis, for chairing this meeting in a fair and equitable manner. Thank you.